This is Dr. Farmer here. I don't want anyone to feel bad or feel some sort of way that they still haven't got it yet because they have concerns, because their concerns are valid. But I think it's important that we have a conversation, that you hear the facts from a medical provider. And I hear this in the workplace too, just because of the nature of our jobs. A lot of us were at risk of contracting COVID, and unfortunately a couple people did. I think a lot of people assume that because they have contracted COVID, that they are good, that they have immunity, and they can still just go on and live their lives. And I'm here to tell you that is not correct. You know, in the initial months after you contract COVID, yes, you will have some level of protection. But historically, your immunity from a natural infection does begin to wane over time. And immunity from a vaccine historically has been a lot stronger than natural immunity. So while you may have contracted COVID and you may be protected in the first couple of months, please don't think that you're gonna have the same level of protection 8 months, 10 months, a year down the line, because you very well may not. And you are at risk of getting it a second time. And you know, I think you kind of, again, like, have to weigh the risks and benefits. Like, is it really worth catching COVID a second time? And, you know, you may have survived the first one, but who's to say how that experience is going to go the second time? And so I feel as though, you know, the best thing you could do for yourself is to give yourself as much protection as possible. And even if you had contracted COVID before, you should still get vaccinated and give yourself as much protection as possible. And finally, you know, for those, and this kind of goes even to the young people as well, for those people that think, you know, COVID's not really that bad. I know a lot of people that caught COVID and, you know, they survived, no problem. And, you know, truth be told, you know, the majority of people that get COVID will live. But still, also keep in mind there are 500,000 people that also died. So this is still a very, very serious disease. But also let's talk a little bit about, as we like to call it, the long haulers. So people that have long-term effects from COVID. So while your illness, you know, from COVID, your symptoms may improve over time, it doesn't mean that you're not gonna have some problems down the line. We're finding that people that do survive from COVID potentially do have some long-term problems, such as problems with their lungs, problems with their heart, and problems with their brain too. A lot of people describe what's called this brain fog, where they have issues concentrating and issues with their memory. And, you know, even on the lung issue, for those that know me know I'm a big basketball fan. Take a look at some of the players in the NBA that have contracted COVID. Do you know quite a few of them that are, you know, they are amazing, amazing athletes. Like, all they do every day is work out and train. So they're in tip-top condition. Do you know some of them still feel the effects of COVID even after catching it months later? Jason Tatum, who plays for the Boston Celtics, had no medical problems whatsoever. Do you know every time he steps on the court, he now has to use an inhaler because otherwise he gets very winded? Did you know that Mo Bamba, that also plays basketball, he also continues to have issues even after contracting COVID months ago? So again, please don't think that just because, you know, people are surviving from COVID more than they are dying, that suddenly means that you're not going to have any problems, because you potentially could. And, you know, I bring that up to say because I think a lot of people always, and that's another thing too, is that they talk about, well, what are the long-term effects of the vaccine? I'm afraid of the long terms. But you know, my thought is, you know, what about the long-term effects of COVID? We're seeing that there are long-term effects of COVID. So again, it's a risk-benefit thing. You have to think about, well, do I really want to risk getting COVID and having long-term problems that we know exist versus taking this vaccine and knowing that so far we are not seeing any long-term effects, keeping in mind that, you know, we've been giving this vaccine out for months at this point, and over 100 million people have taken this vaccine. And, you know, we're not seeing like any long-term effects come about months and months later. In fact, like with vaccines in general, with vaccines, yeah, there can be some rare, very rare adverse effects, but we just don't see it past a certain amount of time. And that's why, you know, when the vaccines went through their clinical trials and they had to get approval by the FDA, They said, hey, we need to see data for at least 2 months because that's historically when we see issues with vaccines, around that 2-month mark or so. But we just don't see historically issues with vaccines 8 months from now, a year from now, a decade from now. Like, that just does not happen. So for, and I say that because for those people who are saying, I want to wait, I want to see how it looks like a year from now, like, please don't let that fear of long-term effects keep you from getting this vaccine and putting yourself at risk of getting COVID, because I'm telling you, we just don't see long-term effects of vaccines months down the line, because it's just not how vaccines work. They get in there, they do their business, and then our bodies get rid of them. They are not hanging around. So I hope that this has been helpful. I think those are probably the top kind of 3 reasons I hear people say that they're kind of afraid. And just again, to summarize, no evidence whatsoever that there is an issue with getting the vaccine in fertility. Young people should get the vaccine because you are still at risk of getting COVID and potentially having some long-term problems. And also, we are seeing evidence that the COVID vaccine helps reduce transmission. Speaking again about the fear of long-term complications from the vaccine itself, we're just not seeing that in vaccines. Out of all the vaccines we made, any type of rare or any type of adverse effect we usually see within a couple months. We don't see it happen months, years down the line. So please don't stress and worry about trying to wait until a decade or 5 years down the line just to see what happens, because vaccines just don't work that way. So thank you guys for listening. I hope this was helpful. Please drop questions, drop comments, talk to your doctor, please, about your concerns. So I'm gonna get ready to watch my Lakers dominate in the playoffs tonight. Showtime is back, baby. Have a good night.